Welcome back to another episode of Dream Team, where club members and players and coaches pick their all-time 1 to 11 from people who have played with them, influenced their career over a period of time. Today we've got Gavin Lee. He's picking his side. Gavin's been one of our youth coaches now for 10 years plus, and also played a number of years before the merge. So, welcome Gavin. How are you?
Good afternoon, Scott. I'm very well, thanks.
Good to see you. Okay, so first question. What was your first game for the club? Can you remember?
Probably it would have been a youth game. Ken Porter was running the youth team. I joined around the late 80s, 88, 89, something like that. I had to pack up playing football because my eyesight was too bad. And in those days, there were not really contact lenses available for kids. So I played football in the winter, cricket in the summer down South Church Park because I live like literally a cricket ball's distance from the park. Went over there, sort of got invited over. A friend of mine got invited to a net and I went with him and didn't really look back. So I would probably say late 80s. I couldn't tell you exactly where, maybe Chalkwell Park. But I do remember a youth game at John Burroughs at Hadley, so it could well have been that. That was, I think I got my first ever run for the club there. I think I pushed the full toss for one. I was over the moon. But yeah, late 80s, so quite a long time ago.
And your first adult game, do you remember that?
Oh dear, I'll be struggling to remember that. That probably would have been the same year because the fourth 11 at that time were playing friendly cricket. So 1, 2 and 3s was league. Fourth 11 on a Saturday was friendly cricket. So a lot of youngsters had the opportunity to come in and play there. So the actual fixture, couldn't tell you who it was. I really couldn't. But most undoubtedly, it was probably at Victory Sports.
Okay. So we'll get onto your team. So through your 30 years of service for the club, who's your first opener?
My first opener going into bat is got a very common nickname at the club. He's still playing for the club, and you could send him out, no feet movement at all, but what an eye, what hands, and that's Steve Laughlin.
Yeah, very good player,
very underrated player. He had fantastic hand-eye coordination, but just wouldn't move his feet. Not a small chap. So if he'd had the old, obviously you and I being coaches, we know a bit more about the lingo. If he'd had his weight transference, God knows how far he could have hit it. But yeah, I mean, alongside that, just a really, really lovely man. Very difficult to find bad words against Laffers. 2 words I've written down about him. He was one of the most encouraging players you could ever have on the pitch. Whether things were going well, going badly, it's, you're 200 and the opposition 200 for 1 and it's a baking hot day, he would always encourage you right up to the end of the match. I never ever forgot that. People of a certain generation will know the words surgical sock when we're relating to Steve Laughlin. That surgical sock, if we ever did a time capsule or a club museum, would have to go into it, I'm afraid. I mean, the stories we could have told you about that sock. And one very, it's just, I suppose Laffers used to be a bit of a naive gentleman. He was surrounded by the youngsters like John Aswaffen and Cowes, all giving him a lot of stick, but he stood his ground, he certainly did. But there was one occasion we couldn't let him, I can't let this pass. We were coming back from a Sunday away game, and it was quite early evening, so I think we'd probably finished relatively early. It was me, Cowes, I think Bells and Laffers, and we decided to go for a McDonald's at the airport. And as we've pulled into the car park, Laffers has called through the window, "Do they do burger and chips?" And Cow's face was just like, what am I dealing with here? I'm at McDonald's, do they do burger and chips? But I went shandy. Laffers, his favourite, always have a shandy, but respect because he had his classic Rover car for years and years that was like a converted garden shed in the end. But no, to open the innings for me, lovely man, really good batsman, very good swing bowler as well. And I played probably as much cricket with Laffers as anybody from third 11, Sundays. Played evening league with Laffers for the club, indoor evening league during the winter months for years. So yeah, very happy to put Laffers in.
Okay, and moving on to who's going to join Laffs?
Going into bat with Laffers is another 13 stalwart from my days, and very early on I got to really like this chap. Very reliable, again, full of encouragement. Open the innings or no, number 3, that would be Pete Stannard for me.
Okay. Tell us a bit more about Pete.
Yeah, I mean, when I was early on, 14, 15, you need the elder gentleman there to be reliable and trustworthy. And, you know, your parents, these day and age, you sort of might be a little bit more cautious, but your parents are letting you leave the house at like 12 in the afternoon and you're coming back at 7, 8 o'clock in the evening. They don't know these people. They're sort of, you know, they rely on basically good people to look after the youngsters. And I always remember, Pete, just very, very safe person to be around, like the likes of him, Liam Laffers as well, Phil Alcock I was good friends with as well when he was playing in the threes. But they were just, you felt safe in their company. Yeah. You know, that's maybe a bit underestimated these days with the kids, because you've got to be very, very cautious. I just really, really like Pete. Again, and a couple of stories about Pete from cricketing point of view. One of them, he helped me get my best ever figures for the club. I was on a bit of a roll. I'd got a fourfer quite early on in the match, second innings, and I said, I'm quite happy with 4, you know, get someone else to come and give them a game sort of thing, because we were going to win the match. Yeah. Pete said, no, stay on, it's your day, don't let this opportunity go. And I ended up getting 6fer, and that was my best figures for the club. I've never forgotten Pete on that day. And he also had a big influence on me getting into electronic music, funny enough. Okay. Had an away game up in Walthamstow, and I didn't travel with them, but I came back with Pete and Liam Buckler. Liam had a classic old Opel car, and on the car, in the car stereo, was Gary Newman. And although it's not totally the top electronic music I listen to now, it was a real seed, and it planted the seed of like, oh, you know, I'm really into this. So yeah, I have a bit of a debt to Pete and also Liam Buckler for my love and passion for electronic dance music.
I think sometimes people don't appreciate just what influence they are, just on and off the pitch with things like that.
My first ever Indian meal. I mean, my mum's a great cook, but very conservative in her menu, and I hadn't had Indian food ever till I joined a cricket club. And obviously it was a real tradition to go for a curry on a Saturday evening, particularly if you played at home. And my first ever curry was with all these lads. And because I was young and I was like only 14, 15 and at school, they chipped in and paid your part of the bill. Yeah. So it might only work out at, like, if there's 10 of you, it might only work out at like 50p extra each. But there was no argument, there was no complaints. They just did it, and it helped tie bonds to the club.
Yeah, no, it's great. So you talk about the likes of Steve Laffin, Pete Stannard. Were they the main influences? Who else were the big influences when you were coming through as a youngster through the teams?
George Gosling. I don't know if many people will be familiar with that name.
No.
I think a lot of people from Southend side of the club will remember the name George Gosling. Yeah. Yorkshireman, one lung, had to wear a chest protector. I'd never seen anyone wear a chest protector, but absolutely brilliant encouragement for the youngsters. Would G them all up, and he was, again, never a bad word. You didn't see him having like aggravation with the opposition, something that I can't pretend that I didn't get involved in some days. But yeah, Mike Tracy, the late Mike Tracy, he was captain of the 4th team when I first started playing. He was an old maths teacher from Belfast. He sort of sadly passed away. Mike 18 as well. Some of you might be familiar with his sons. Paul and Neil played for the youth team, and I was very good friends with Paul and Neil for many years. Mike was one of my first captains. So it's just, I suppose, the adults who were your captains and the vice captains who would always G you up. And I mean, I never felt uncomfortable. You know, it's a long day in football. I mean, a game of cricket's like a longer day than me going up to football and back in London. Yeah. You know, it's a long, long day. And you've got to be with people that you get on with and trust. No. And I think trust was a major part of, you don't think about it then, but when you think about it back now, the trust that I had with these people is just immeasurable, really.
No, that's great. Okay, so back to your team. Number 3 for you.
Number 3, one of the 2 best players I ever played with through the club. I was fortunate enough to play many, many years on a Sunday. I held my own, I think, with, again, playing alongside a lot of first 11 and second 11 players. This player was a fantastic batsman, absolutely superb batsman, and a very, very underrated quick bowler, and that's Newman Khan.
Yeah.
I had Newman come through the fourth 11. When I was about 18, the fourth 11 was looking for a captain, and I said, well, I'd be willing to do it if we went into a league. I said, I'm not captaining the fourth 11 if it's just friendlies. So there was a little bit of push and pull with the selection committee and the club as a whole, whether or not we wanted, because there was that theory that Saturday cricket, you could have some friendlies and it wouldn't be too competitive. And I said, if you want a strong club, every league, every 11 has to be a league team. So we sort of won that debate, and together with Jeff Wood, who I must mention as well, was a great help as sort of we co-captained the fourth 11 for a couple of years. And I had Newman come through that, Ben Wathen came through that, Wayne Spear, John Horn's first men's game for the club. He got 3 wickets in the last over to win the match. Lee was 7 down with 1 over to go. He got the 3. All those youngsters who've hundreds of performances all come through the fourth 11 when I was lucky enough to be sort of 18, 19. But Newman was just a fantastic player to watch. Hit the ball so hard, excellent technique, kept his head very, very still at the crease, which is something that I wasn't really too conscious of until I went into coaching. Really important. And a very fast bowler, very good bowler, but I don't think he quite had the drive to be a bowler as much as he could have been. I think if other people had his ability and they weren't batsmen, I think they might have made more of that bowling ability. But as an all-rounder and a genuinely really nice bloke, and obviously he's been away at the club and come back, I think he has a bit of a magnetic draw to the club. He keeps bringing him back.
Yeah, so good to have at the club, Newman. Very good. Okay, so on to 4.
On to 4 would be one of the other 2 best youngsters at the time that I played with. Again, mainly nearly always on Sundays. Excellent, a very, very good bowler. Excellent batsman again. Very funny young lad, and genuinely showed an interest in a lot of players, even if you weren't in the same team as him. And that was Ben Wathen.
Yeah.
Remember a few stories about Ben. We had one incident where we played Broomhill over at the park when they shared our pavilion, and we used to have the Yard of Ale, and Ben, being a little bit of a naive lad at the time, was dared to do a Yard of Ale for a certain purse, as it were. And I was on bar that night, I think, with Johners, and I made sure that the money that had been collected, I said, he's not touching a drop of that at the yard until it gets me. I held the pot because I didn't necessarily trust the lads to pay him. But he did it, and yes, it was probably not the wisest move that Ben ever did. But sometimes with alcohol, you have to learn the hard way. In fact, normally you have to learn the hard way. But again, I really enjoyed playing cricket with Ben. Most of the time there were 2 11s between us, but he showed me an awful lot of encouragement. I remember one indoor match where we used to put 2 teams out. We had an A and a B side, and we met in a match up at Park School, Rayleigh. Ben got me out LBW, and then when we went about, I got him out snick behind caught cows. And I still remember Ben saying after the game, he said, "Well bowled." And so when you get something like, and also Newman, he didn't say a lot, but if Newman said to you, "Well bowled," it not saying that anyone else, it didn't matter, but this carried a little bit more weight.
More recognition. That's a good way to be, yeah. No, very good cricketer, Ben. So, hard to captain, was he at that age?
At 18, no, he was quite pliable, to be honest. I mean, he didn't really go. I mean, I was 18, and so 18, 19, so what would he have been? 13, maybe? Yeah. I'm not too sure about the ages. So, yeah, you're not going to be too lippy at 13. And in the end, and if you think about cricket, it's quite rare in the fact that men and children or youngsters can play on the same side.
Yeah, no, it's very true. It's
There's no, once you get to men's cricket, it's not age group related. So that is, again, going back to say the Laffers and the Pete situation. They're like on a game of cricket. They don't necessarily want to babysit youngsters during the day on their day off, but they realise it's part of the club. The club always came first with so many of these people.
Yeah, no, it's great clubman. Okay, so number 5 for you.
Well, number 5, put simply, is one of my closest friends in the whole planet. I don't have many people I can share my sort of somewhat odd sense of humour with at times. A very, very technically good batsman, very, very good. His family had no cricketing history at all, so there's undoubtedly a real element of some natural talent there. He played most of his cricket in the second 11. I didn't play as many games of cricket with him as I would have liked to have done, but nevertheless, I speak to him nearly every day or in touch with him every day. And my number 5 is Chris Chambers.
Yeah, good cricketer, Chris.
Very good cricketer. The only thing I would say is he's very, very good bat, very useful bowler, but he can't dive. Don't put him as a sweeper. He admitted it as well. He would just miss time a dive. It would be over it, too short. The classic ones, he would dive too early, and he would be full spread out, his arms out like Superman, and the ball sort of 5 yards in front of him. But that would be a very minor criticism of a player who had an awful lot of natural talent. Very, very funny man as well. I'll probably say the funniest person that I know. And I have a big interest in military history and war films and military books, and I share that passion with him as well. And you can't always find people to share your passions with, and when you do, you tend to be quite close to them.
No, I understand that. I think one of the things I found with Chris, as you say, is loads of natural talent, but probably had a few too many theories about batting, and he sort of almost made himself not worse. That's not the word I'm looking for, but do you know what I mean? But worried too much.
Yeah, overcomplicated it at times. Yeah. But I mean, yeah, he can go on hot streaks. He plays in for Barnes, West London, and I think last season, he started off, including friendlies, like 3 tons in like his first 5 games, something like that. So an awful lot of natural ability, and someone who, I knew from quite an early age that I'd be good friends with this lad. It's a bit weird. I mean, I think he was 16 and I was like 22, but that's a world apart as ages at that. But I could always tell then just his sort of sense of humour, maybe it's like very dry sarcasm. I thought, this would be a lad I could probably be good mates with in years to come. Quite fortunate I am as well.
Good bowler as well.
He was underrated. Yeah, he underestimated himself. I do remember a Sunday game where he got a good bowl. He was on a 4-fer and he'd never ever got a 5-fer ever. And we were geeing him up, and in the end, he just couldn't bowl anymore. His knees were almost like stumps. He couldn't bowl. He was knackered, so we brought him off, but he got his 4-fer. But yeah, underestimated. Again, I played a lot of evening league with Chris, particularly with the bank, when I played in the bank cricket evening league outdoors. If you think the 4th 11 used to scrape around for players, then you should be captain in the bank evening league side. But I got Chris to play many, many games and just let him open, just go and let him do his thing. But a really, really genuinely funny person to be around.
True, very true. So the likes of Newman, Ben, Chris Chambers, you captained them all on Sundays. They must have been good times.
Yeah, we had a great laugh. We had with the Sunday, it was tend to be the guys who were unmarried or didn't have children at the time. And so we tended to be playing, of the 11, 8 of us used to play every week. I can't remember too many matches from an outcome point of view. We were playing in the Ibex, the 2nd division of the Ibex, and then we went up. I can't remember if we went up when I was captain. I really can't, because we used to play friendlies as well on a Sunday. It used to be like Tillingham, we used to play home or away, and then Latchington we played away. I remember a Sunday going away at Latchington, and half the village came out to watch us because it was quite a big deal to play Southend-on-Sea, and they put on this spread in their sort of village hall for us we were quite embarrassed. It was a feast, an absolute feast. So Sundays were less competitive because you almost had your match, your league game and your points on the Saturday. And I wouldn't quite say it was down tools, because you can't play cricket seriously if you even try to. Yeah. If you don't play cricket seriously, it's going to hurt you. So the edge wasn't quite so sharp, but it was still there. If we weren't performing, I remember one Sunday match where we've just fielded appallingly. I actually said to him, I said, look, I'm going to have a word with you here. Normally I wouldn't. And it was just, if you're just going to mess around, then don't play. Yeah. And the lads did actually listen. It was like, I wouldn't say it was like, tub thumping Churchill stuff, but it was just a reminder that you could be doing something else today. If you don't want to do this cricket, don't turn up. And I think no one had really spoken to me like that before. And it was like, look, have a bit of professional pride. amateur pride even.
Yeah.
But in
Treats the right
general,
way.
very, very few issues with any lads. I don't remember falling out with anyone big time as my captain.
Great stuff.
Because I think as a captain, you've got to try and, particularly in the fourth and third 11, you have more responsibility to give people a game.
Yeah. Yeah, you want
I
to
think
try.
in the first team, if you're a first team opening bowler and you're 4 overs, 0 for 40, off you go.
Yeah.
You know, and you won't come back that day, and that has to be respected. But you know, I mean, in third and fourth 11, you've got to give, particularly youngsters, because they're not going to come back.
No.
I mean, if you bat them 11 and field them fine leg, they're not going to come back. So you've got to give them an opportunity, and I think that's the one thing I was always grateful for at the club. We had the opportunity to play.
No, it's great stuff. Okay, so back to your side. We're up to 6 now, number 6.
Well, number 6 fits in nicely with my word there, opportunity. And this is a gentleman who was the youth coach when I joined. He was effectively running it on his own. So he was getting us to the matches around South East Essex in the evening. He then was my coaching mentor myself when I decided to do level 2. And you know yourself, the amount of work and hours that you have to put in to be supervised. Both formally and informally, and an excellent player, absolute nightmare to captain, but a lovely gentleman and a name that runs through Southend, and that is Ken Porter.
Yeah, lovely bloke.
You tend to take people for granted as a youth player. You sort of think, well, someone will be there, or someone will phone me up and tell me where the game is. And it's only when you end up doing yourself, I know it's a bit of a cliche, but you realise, well, they're important, those people. You need people like that to run things. Otherwise, again, it comes back to that opportunity. I mean, if I didn't have that opportunity then, I don't know whether or not I would have played cricket for another club. I certainly wouldn't have played for the old boys because I was at Southend High. So the last thing I wanted to do was sort of go to school and then sort of have to be involved in it out of school as well. I was never into that. And obviously, Southbridge Park being so close to where I lived, it was the natural club for me to go to. But if there hadn't been a youth set up, I would have probably gone somewhere else. You know, and sort of the years I've given to the club over particularly coaching, I'd like to think that I've given back what the club has given me as an opportunity. But that might have never have taken place if it hadn't been for Ken. But it doesn't matter how long you've known Ken, doesn't matter whether you know him briefly or for many, many years, he'll still just call you boy. You know, I think I might have, once I qualified as a coach and started sort of taking over, because I think Ken wanted to sort of move away from doing the youth. He'd been doing it so long.
Yeah.
I totally appreciated that. But yeah, it was only after I think I started taking over the youth that he started calling me Gavin instead of boy. And I think that's like the height of respect. If Ken can call you by your name, I think you've made it, to be honest.
Well, to be fair, if he remembers your name as a start, there's not many people. I think that's why everyone gets called boy.
I think that you might have a point there. It might be everyone is boy, but yeah, he's just a really, really important person. And as I say, was there for me when I was a youth player, and then was a great help in me becoming a coach myself to coach youth players. No. And the youth setup we've got now is immeasurably down to the fact that we had one from the very start, to be honest.
No, it gives us a platform. Okay, so number 7.
Number 7 is my wicket keeper, and I have heard him mentioned and described on other dream teams. One of the most gentle souls I've ever met. A lovely, lovely guy. Underestimated himself as a keeper. I know that it was either Tommy Kenton or John has mentioned it. He really, really, and I think you did as well, he was really underestimating himself. A very gentle soul, but with no confidence. You know, I think he almost felt as though if his mates were encouraging him, he thought we might have been taking the mickey out of him. And that was the last thing. He was a really, really good player. And I think I should probably mention his name now because I've been going on about it. It's Andy Callaway. Yeah. The number of Court Callaway bowled leads that I had over the years just really stuck in my mind. I played with undoubtedly better wicket keepers. I think the best wicket keeper I played with consistently over the years on Sundays would have been Wayne Spear. Wayne got me my first ever and only stumping as a bowler. I mean, I was never particularly quick. If you were a good wicketkeeper, you could stand up to me, no problem, really. And he once stood up to me, took one down square leg. I'm waiting for the wide, and the geezer's giving him stumps. So I was over the moon with that. But I played so much cricket with Cows, predominantly third team, a lot of Sunday team, evening league, indoor and outdoor. And again, a really, really funny bloke. Has hardly a bad word to say about anyone. And I think the only time I sort of really had a go at him once was because obviously he's a Liverpool supporter. Yeah. And I remember we were driving home. Robin Edmonds, the late Robin Edmonds, was driving us home, and we stopped off at Cows because he wanted to get changed before we went down onto the clubhouse. So I'm sat in the front of the car, and Robin's like waiting there, and Cows gets into the back seat, and I look round. He's wearing a Manchester United shirt, and so I've put my hand on the steering wheel, and I said to Robin, "Hold up, we're not going anywhere here." And I looked round at him, and he knew what was coming because of me. He knew what I'd lay into. I said, "What the hell are you wearing that for? You call yourself a Liverpool fan?" And he didn't know where to look. But I think I was justified. If you call yourself a Liverpool fan and you're even seen in jest wearing a Manchester United fan, you're going to get it.
Not happening.
But again, a lovely man. I know that Tommy mentioned he's moved away. Definitely someone you're going to miss around the place because
good clubman,
a very good clubman, very funny, and as I said earlier, just a very gentle, kind individual.
Very well, good way to put it about him, mate. Good words there. Okay, so number 8.
Number 8 is probably a spot down the batting order that he would prefer, but this is very much a captain's choice. When I was third 11 captain, I wanted this gentleman in my team every week. He was worth 10 runs in the field on his own and probably another 10, 15 runs encouraging everybody else. One of the best motivators that you'll ever meet anywhere. Again, I'm very pleased to call him a very good friend that I'm in touch with all the time, and that's Kevin Salt.
Huh?
Came to cricket quite late in his adult life. He hadn't had any real background in cricket whatsoever, and more than made up for his lack of experience and ability at the time with his sheer enthusiasm. And I mean, he's a proper dynamo, Kev. He's sort of getting going, and and the stuff that he's done for the club is pretty immeasurable. But Kev comes under the category of, within any sporting organisation, of must-have. He gets things done. He gets people to do things that they might, that they might not necessarily want to do, but he'll sort of say, "Look, we need this done. We need this done. I will do this if you can do that." And he's an excellent person to have at the club. Thoroughly enjoyed playing with him. I mean, when I was captain, he was like my regimental sergeant major. If I needed, I never had any aggravation on the pitch if Kev Salt was on the same team as me. I remember one match we played Orsett at home, and I've never played in rain like it. I mean, it was a car wash. Liam Buckler was at long on. One of their guys has driven it up in the air. Liam didn't even see it, so it could come down on his head. He didn't see the visibility was shocking. So with Orsett needing 10 to win, they obviously wanted to stay on, and this was just ludicrous weather. So we've come off, and the opposition captain, who had a bit of a reputation, wicketkeeper, made a beeline for Mike Scott, who, that was his name at the time, was captain in the third 11. And Kev Salt made it perfectly clear to this gentleman that he would be highly unadvised to carry it on, and nothing else happened. It was just a very gentle, persuasive, I wouldn't want to call it threat, but piece of advisement, shall we say. But yeah, a very good friend, massively passionate West Ham supporter. Obviously, we share similar dislikes of other London clubs, shall we say. So that obviously forms a bit of a bond between us. And also the fact that we've been season ticket holders at our respective clubs for so long. We speak to each other as fans who go as opposed to fans who don't. And it's a little bit, people who go to games regularly, they're a slightly different breed to the football fans who don't.
No, that's understandable. So coming on, so we talked a bit about your influences at the club as you grew up. Who were your cricketing heroes from like the England team or international team?
From the England team, we'd have to say Graham Gooch. When And you've also got to take into account that when we were growing up, 15, 16 onwards, Test match cricket was on the BBC One.
Yeah.
We had the opportunity to watch the England cricket team live. And so Graham Gooch for Essex and England, absolutely outstanding. Particularly Gucci, because Essex was so successful and they used our pavilion. So when County Week was down at Southchurch Park, we put up our own marquee. And a lot of it at the time was 3-day cricket. So you'd have 2 3-day matches, and in say a John Player special match, you'd have 7 days of cricket. Every game would be absolutely sold out. Essex would contrive to get a chase 300 in something like 60 overs, and Goose would just smash them off. He really would. Not many other Essex players sort of featured too highly in my memory of cricketers that I've followed. Mainly just England. Devon Malcolm always rung a bell because he was just so fast. It was just an absolutely breathtaking, the quickest bowl I've ever seen live, particularly at Southchurch Park, because our marquee was side onto the wicket. Yeah. The Derbyshire wicketkeeper, excuse me, was nearer the boundary boards than he was the stumps. And watching Malcolm come in from the Northumberland Road end, he bowled the ball, and the wicketkeeper's taken it above his head before you've even seen it. It was really, really fast. And there was just one other, more of a 1980s sort of memory. You probably remember the old CFAX and teletext.
Yep.
That used to be the only way that you could follow or find out the scores from games around the country. And there were always 2 names that stood out for me whenever I used to go through all of the different scores for all the different counties. It was Bold Donald or Bold Wakar. And you used to sort of think, I don't know who these people are, but when you get older, you realise Alan Donald was arguably one of the very finest fast bowlers of all time.
Yeah.
And Wakar Yunus in his partnership with Wasim, again, arguably the best opening bowling partnership of all time, particularly for Pakistan. But those names, whenever I went on teletext, they would just clean up every single week. And you sort of think, I don't know who these people are, but I know your names. It was very much sort of an influence. And when you got to see Donald play live after South Africa's ban was curtailed, and you actually saw how good Donald was, you'd think he would have got 600 Test wickets. Yeah, if he'd been playing Test cricket from 20 years old, he'd have got 600.
Okay, so coming back to your team now, Gavin. On to number 9.
Number 9. Well, this is a guy who's no longer at the club. Played nearly all of his career for us in the 3s and the 4s. A real character, and that is Dennis Compton. One of the most enthusiastic lads I ever played cricket with. Absolutely loved the sport. My mum used to teach supply at Thorpe Bay High many years ago, and she remembers 2 people from the cricket club that she taught. One of them was Alan Monty. She used to say how polite that Alan was. And he was, you know, you can always say Del has got a serious polite manners, a really nice guy. But she said about Dennis, doesn't matter what time of the year it was or how old he was, she'd always find him, he'd always be walking around the school with a cricket bat. And it didn't matter whether it was winter or not. So I used to say, well, I mean, it's like December, Mum. What's he doing? He said, no, he's got a cricket bat. So he absolutely loved the game. Dennis makes my team as well, because I probably drunk more pints with Dennis at the clubhouse more than anyone else. We were big fans of, John has mentioned it in his dream team, the drink called Eagle Smooth. And we also went through a phase where we got Boddingtons on draft. And Dennis used to live over the railway bridge on Southchurch Road. So we used to be sort of 2 of the 3 last people to leave the clubhouse, walk to mine, and then he'd carry on walk over the road to Southchurch. Again, a real joy to be around when you're playing the game. Sometimes down the clubhouse, even on a Saturday evening, particularly if you've had a disappointing result, you'd have to tell Dennis, look, can we not talk about next week's game until Monday at selection? You know, he'd come up to you and say, Gav, I want to talk to you about next week's seamers. And I'd just give him one look and say, no, Dennis, we're not doing that. There's another thing about Dennis that not many people would have appreciated was if you got to travel in his car. Now that was an experience. Now, if you were the passenger, the footwell, and this is something that Chris has mentioned as well, Dennis's footwell resembled the trash compactor in Star Wars. You're very, very reluctant to put your feet down anywhere. There was McDonald's cartons and, I don't know, empty cans of drink, crisp packets, things like that. It didn't really treat the car as though it was like, you know, his pride and joy, Dennis. But when England beat Germany 5-1, I can't remember the year now, we were playing in Benfleet, and it was a Saturday evening kickoff, and my lift back to the clubhouse was with Dennis. We were itching to get back to much of the game, obviously, as possible. And Dennis absolutely, within the speed limit, of course, floored it from Benfleet all the way back to the clubhouse. And we only missed 1-1. When we arrived, it was 1-1. And then so England went on to win 5-1. So I was grateful for Dennis he went all the back roads. He knew all the back roads from Benfleet round to the clubhouse. We avoided any traffic. And because that was on like ITV, the streets were empty anyway, England, Germany. But yeah, I always remember that about Dennis. But I did spend most of that journey with my feet above the floor level.
What about Dennis as a cricketer?
Really, really interesting lad to play cricket with. I couldn't always make him out if he was a better bat or a bowler.
Okay.
Because he didn't have much of a neck, Dennis. His bowling action was quite unique. He'd scuttle into the stumps, and all of a sudden his sort of like leading arm would just pop out from underneath his elbow almost, and then the ball would be down there. But a very good player. I like playing with Dennis, but he had the best. He don't know how to describe this really, but when he was out, he had the most glorious walk off that you could ever imagine. I mean, the bat was under the arm, the gloves were off, and he strode off. He was proud to be out, Dennis, at sometimes. he absolutely loved it. But again, when you play a game that you share that passion with for so many years, it's very difficult not to be good friends.
No.
He also went through a phase, Dennis, I don't know why, of wearing very obscure football shirts. And each Saturday, you'd turn up and you'd have a brand new shirt on. And you'd be like, Dennis, what is that? And it would be like Admira Wacker or Wacker from Austria. I didn't even know you could buy those shirts. So God knows, but I think he probably just got a job a lot. But yeah, I mean, he was a Spurs fan, Dennis, bless him for his sins. But I didn't hold that against him. He was a good friend and someone I really enjoyed playing with.
Great stuff. Now we're on number 10.
Number 10, well, this is my main spinner in the side. Again, someone I've played probably more games of cricket with than the vast majority at the club. Third 11, fourth 11, evening league. Very, very good friend of mine. We work with him in the coaching department. And his son has come on to be a very good player, and that is Graham Butler. Yeah,
good lad. Good club.
Graham, when I first started, was predominantly a wicket keeper, and I mean, I've always had opinions on people, and obviously it doesn't always stand you in good stead. And I always thought to myself, I'm not overly convinced about Graham as a wicket keeper. I mean, I was in no position to say anything. I didn't really know the bloke at the time, but when he sort of converted and started playing regularly as an off spinner, you know, you completely thought, well, I haven't got any doubts about that. You know what I mean? Yeah. He was a really, really good third 11 off spinner and a lovely, lovely guy as well. Yeah. He was the third 11 captain, I think 2 or 3 years before I did it. And I can't have been. There were 1 or 2 moments where, you know, it's almost like an apology to camera now, where I wasn't the best behaved. And Graham, bless him, is not like very demonstrative. He was sort of like, he's a very laid back, easygoing sort of guy, and he finds it very hard to sort of like, you know, back someone up against the wall and sort of say, look, behave, do this, do that. And you sort of almost feel bad, worse for you know, making it hard for a good friend to captain rather than losing the plot. Whether or not you were right or not, it doesn't matter.
No.
But no, Graham, I regard as a very, very good friend of mine through the club. Really enjoyed playing with him. Another really, really quiet individual, but when he says something, it's worth listening to, which should be the sort of the balance when people are speaking. But yeah, lots and lots of wickets, Graham, in the
Yeah.
third 11, lost and lots of wickets, and he's still playing now, and it must be really nice for him to be able to take the field with Kieran.
Yeah, I don't think he'll return the field with Kieran for too much longer. I think
that's probably right. Kieran is.
May well outgrow his dad.
He may well outgrow him, and in height as well. You never know.
No, that's it.
But
as
as a batsman, I spotted Kieran last year, had turned a corner. Again, with his coaching, trying to help him with his batting, his head is very, very still.
Yeah.
And anyone listening to this who wants one piece of coaching advice, when they're batting, keep your head very still. I mean, it just sounds so simple, it sounds so basic, and Kieran plays very, very straight, very, very straight, very, very correct. And so it's quite nice that Graham has helped coach him, and we've all helped coach the youngsters. Yeah. And then when you see these people coming through, and as I believe the 3 bowling awards went to youth players, former youth players.
Yeah, we'll come on to that at the end. Yeah, you're right.
I mean, that suggests that, you know, the setup that we have and the people that we have working within the youth team are all really, really like passionate about doing it.
No,
and in his own way, Graham is full of real wisdom about
cricket.
He knows the game.
Very quiet, but as when he speaks, you do tend to listen because you know it's going to be something useful to come out.
Without a doubt. Yeah, he's got good sage advice sometimes, Graham, and he's a much calmer head. Much calmer head. Sometimes I get a little bit frustrated by some of the behaviour of the youngsters, and my own the way I might deal with it might not be the best way of dealing with it sometimes. But you know, with Graham, you know, he's someone I would listen to and take his advice.
Yes, good mix, as you say. Okay, so your last man now.
Well, my last but no man, certainly not least. Well, certainly not as a bowler. I played many games with this guy in the third 11. They say bowling partnerships as well, and I think there's no doubt about it. If I sort of reflect on the club years, this guy I opened the bowling with more times than anyone else, and that is Dean Johnson. Again, a highly competitive guy. When he crosses that white line, a bit like me, he sort of suddenly turns into a little bit of a different person. But I think in sport, that isn't a bad way, as long as you can keep it on the pitch.
Yeah.
And it doesn't cross the line, even when you're on the pitch itself. I think sport should be played with an element of not necessarily needle, but it should be a bit of competitive. Yeah. And the reason I say that is because I think the mental side of sport is a challenge to overcome as well. You might have all the ability in the world, but if you can affect someone's game just by a comment, not even necessarily malicious, well, you might just remind a batsman of a weakness or remind a bowler that he hasn't got a wicket in a few weeks. I think the mental side of the sport is as much of a challenge to overcome as the physical and the skill set. I mean, when England won the Ashes 3-1 away, they lost the one by a massive score. It wasn't like they lost by a few runs. It was a massive score. So you get to the point where, well, that game's done. Let's move on and we'll go to the next one. And it was a mental that England were no worse than Australia on that one game. Mentally, Australia had the upper hand, but England came back. But yeah, Dino, we used to have a bit of a laugh with Dino that he got the worst 8-fer in club history. We were, again, this was over at Wellstead, and I think we were playing Basildon, and Chris was in the side as well. And I was bowling really well from the pavilion end. I just couldn't get a wicket. It was play and miss. And in the end, they just stopped playing shots at me. And at the other end, they were having a party at Dino's expense. Everything went up in the air. And I remember, I think of his 8 wickets, 2 of them were bowled and the other 6 were caught somewhere on the ground. But it's very, very churlish to criticise a man and say it was a bad 8-fer. You can't have a bad 8-fer.
I'll take a bad 8-fer every day.
A bad 8-fer over a good 5-fer any day of the week. But again, I think Dino, one of the main reasons he's in the side, again, he's a very good friend. I've played a lot of cricket with him over the years. Obviously now as club chairman, we need to give him all the support that he can. I mean, even in the short time that he's been the chairman, it feels like the club has made some big positive strides, particularly on a human level.
That's it.
But he was the most probably the most competitive person I played with all the time. You know, it really meant a lot to him to play. But he is in at 11 for a reason, and I certainly don't claim to be any sort of gifted batsman. But Dino will probably go down as one of the more weaker number 11s that I ever saw. Planted that long leg down the wrong line, bowled off stump. Now, that was pretty common way of Dino getting out. But, you know, cricket is a great sport. You can be brilliant at one and not so good at another, and it doesn't really make any difference.
No. That's a pretty good 1 to 11 you've picked there, Gavin. Anyone you sort of could have put in, lots of people you could have put in, or other names?
Again, I've got a few names written down of people who are, like, again, massive club men, people I played a lot of games with, some very good players. They're not in it. They're not made the scene for any other reason than the fact that really I can only get 11 in.
Yeah. No.
A couple of Craigs, Craig Porter and Craig Carter. Craig Porter was probably the best left-handed bat I played with on Sundays. Probably just didn't play enough games of cricket with Craig for him to get into the side. It was probably always going to be 2 third 11 regulars that I was going to evoke. Carter, again, absolute, a real character. First Australian I ever met, and thankfully he's not like most of the Australians that I've met in the past. And even though my brother-in-law is an Australian, so if he does get to watch this, hello Warren, how are you? Craig, it was an interesting story. We played a game over at Grey Gas. I don't think they're playing now, but somewhere in Grays. And it was a 4th 11 match, and the opposition we had too many, and the opposition didn't have enough. So me and my friend ended up playing for the opposition. I dropped Craig Carter twice in the outfield, and he went on to get a ton. So I'm sure he still owes me for something somewhere for that.
Yeah.
Other names just to briefly mention, Doc Singh. I've got obviously a lovely man, but I couldn't bat with Doc. I mean, you just couldn't bat with Doc.
No.
Del Monte, again, absolutely fantastic character, really funny man, very, very dry, but he's not getting me enough runs, Del, so sorry, mate. Spear, again, from the youngsters. I was probably, the team is nearly all third 11, apart from Newman and Ben. I couldn't get everyone in. Spear, just a bit under Newman and Ben for the influence it had on me over the career, but again, Wayne, a massive club man, someone who loves the club to bits. He's been there. I captained him from a very early age. Always remember him turning up at Victory, full of enthusiasm, absolutely full of beans, loved the game, and his enthusiasm for it hasn't changed. Johnny Horn, who fits in with the category of players I played with him for years, mentioned his debut for the club. He got a 5, or it might have even been 6, where he got 3 in the last over. Never forget that. I think Kev Salt bought him his jug and said, take that round, and that, you know, makes him feel part of the club. Nigel Green, who I'm really glad is back involved in the club. He's a very sensible, calm, level head with a professional take on serious issues. Again, but with a brilliant sense of humour. You could have a right good laugh with Nigel, but I couldn't get him in the side because I hardly ever played with Nigel over the years. And I'm not having anyone bowl 26 overs from one end. Sorry, I'm not having that.
I think it's very fair.
Yeah, and one other name I'd like to mention, if I've missed anyone else off who I care for and about, then that's the way it goes. But one other name, he moved to Bristol quite a few years ago. See him occasionally when we meet up for our sort of annual curry that we've had to postpone of late, and that's Phil Alcott. Had a great sense of humour, very, very dry man. I mean, seriously, dry martini without any martini. He was very, very dry sense of humour. A very good cricketer. I've got memories of when I was about 14. Me and my friend who I used to knock around with down South Church Park, we would sort of play up against the wire mesh fence, and about 40, 50 yards along would be Phil Alcott and Dave Alcott. And I sort of realised then that I had some way to go in terms of ability to even get close to them. I never got close to Dave Alcott's ability, but I might have got as good as Phil as a bowler. He was a good swing bowler, but a better batsman than swing bowler, I thought. But again, I spent a lot of time in his company in the third 11. And I think the thing that one word that would sum up nearly all of the characters that I've managed to pick and mentioned is laughter.
Yeah.
We all share a hell of a lot of laughter, and sometimes it gets forgotten. I wouldn't say it's underrated, but it certainly can get forgotten. And you know, with the club taking positive turns in the future, then I hope that we can see a lot more of these people down the clubhouse. I mean, I'm certainly not making any real plans to come back as a player, but obviously I'm still heavily involved in the club, and yeah.
So,
I hope to get down the club when we're playing again and have a few beers with these people.
No, that's good. So just before we wrap up, we haven't got long left. Just
sure.
You obviously, you and I do a lot with the coaching.
Yeah.
Who are the ones you see coming through in the next couple of years?
Well, it depends what age you're looking at. Obviously, Kieran is only, I think, 15.
Yeah,
I'm not
14,
sure
15,
if he's even that old. Kieran, obviously, is coming through, is really good. Obviously, we're quite fortunate to have Libby at our cricket club. Gone are the days where it was a novelty to see a girl turn up to nets. She is a very, very good cricketer. Probably needs a little bit more confidence in her batting. Might have to wear one or two to realise that you are going to get hit as a batsman. But she's excellent, and I hope she continues her pathway. I mean, last year, in the capacity as my job as an analyst, I saw all three of the Sunrisers games at Chelmsford, and if Libby continues her progress and her growth, from what I've seen that she would be competing against in a few years' time, I think she's got a reasonable chance. Not necessarily being a professional, but being, you know, getting quite close to it. She might have to up her batting a bit. I must admit, it's so long since we've done any coaching that I've tended to forget quite a few of the names. One name that sprung out to me was Barrett. I can't remember his surname, but
I can't.
You know the one. He's the BAA or BARAAT.
He played a couple of games last year. Bowled well.
Yeah, he just turned up out of the blue. We got quite a lot of lads from Southend-on-Sea in the youth setup, and they speak to each other. And I think it was just a case of, I'm a member of a club, come along. He came along, bowled 2 balls, and I just thought, hang on, you can see that as a coach. The more experienced you are as a coach, the less time it takes you to identify something that you like the look of. He's got such a smooth, natural action, really has. Great attitude, really quiet. I had to make a bit of a guinea pig of him one evening. I called Danny Saggers over. I said, Danny, just check this guy's action out. And Danny looked at me and he just said, there's not a lot you can do with, you'll have to do with that.
No.
But again, these people just turn up out of the blue. I get a real buzz out of seeing youngsters you've not seen before. And then you see them. Cricket's a unique sport. I mean, if you kick a football, most people look the same. 10 people line up, kick a ball, there's no real difference. But you get 10 lads turn up and bowl, every action is unique. It's like a thumbprint. And when I saw Barrett bowl, I thought it's worthwhile doing this coaching lark, because you can just give these people a platform, give the encouragement, and I see that he's on the selection for the Saturdays. So
that's it.
That's really, really good. But
I think
in general, sorry, go on, mate.
I was going to say, last year, Benji Houghton was top wicket taker for the second team, or the B team, and Luke Geiler for the A team, which is obviously good for the coaches coming through, that people who are making a transition from youth cricket to adult and starting to succeed a little bit. So
that's our primary objective, is to feed the adult 11s effectively its own supply. I mean, Luke Geiler has always impressed me, not so much as his ability, which is obvious, but he's always asking questions. I mean, he'll come up to you and he'll go, Gav, what about this grip here? And he'll come up and say, well, my county coach has asked me to grip it this way. And I'll say, well, ask him why. Said, I'm not going to challenge the county coach, far from it, but ask him why. Don't just accept what someone tells to you. And that's why when I try and do a bit of particularly one-to-one coaching, is to explain to the batsman or the bowler why we're asking them to do something. Don't just get them to do it. If they can understand why you're doing it, then it's all well and good. One thing I did help Luke with, because he's left-handed, isn't he, left armour?
Yeah.
His planted foot his feet would be pointing at a bit of an angle, and I said, "You're putting a tremendous strain on your ankle like that.
Yeah.
Try and get." I mean, I was the last person to worry. My front foot splayed all over the place with my action, but with Luke, it was try and get his front foot dead straight, almost get it coming through 12 o'clock. And I think it's just sometimes a little bit of advice can go a long way, and you don't always appreciate it. But I'm delighted to see the youngsters doing so well, because that's what the primary objective of any youth setup is.
No, that's right. That's exactly as you say. It's very rewarding to see when it all comes good.
Certainly is, mate. I mean, we don't do it for anything else other than what you might call kicks. So
Yeah.
your kicks have to be from seeing the kids progress. My philosophy was just try and get coaching to get kids to be a better level than me. Now, some people might laugh and say that wouldn't be too hard, but I had a reasonably successful club career at a reasonably decent standard. So if you can be better than me, then you will be able to play adult cricket as much and as long as you would like to do it.
No, that's very true.
So I hope obviously once this COVID is done and dusted, I don't really see us being allowed to go indoors, if at all this season, to be honest. So hopefully we might be able to we might get out in May or June.
That's it. It's just a case of wait and see. I think that's what it is. So we shall see. Right.
Exactly, mate.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time, Gavin.
You're welcome, Scott. I've enjoyed it.
It's been great speaking to you. Thank you for all the memories. Thank you very much for your time, mate.
Thanks, Scott. Appreciate your time.
Cheers, Gavin.